Hey, Julie here with Just Plain Fun, and today I'm going to show you how to make the bordered stripes block in using the quilt as you piece method. And you'll get, if you haven't already seen my previous videos or downloaded my PDF files that go with them, you basically get something like this inside the PDF file, along with a list of materials and sizes that you'll need. And the sizes are underneath this block. I'm not going to show them to you because this one's for members. But basically, this is the block that we're going to make. And on this block here, this one here, it tells you which patch to use because the patches are labeled right here. And then it tells you what order. Like the center one is the first one that I'm going to put together. And then you can do either two and three or 2 and 3, as long as you go from the center out. That's fine. In fact, you could go this way and then this way. That's up to you. And then the same thing with here. It doesn't really, these two numbers really don't matter. They're the last two that you put on. Okay, and this is a double-sided block. So let me take a look. Let me show you the back side. Okay, the back side, yeah, I should have used a more solid color, but it still looks pretty. And today I'm going to show you how to do a 10-inch version of this one. This is 5 inches. Well, technically it's 5.5 cut size. It'll be 5 inches finished size. And I do plan, I'm making a whole bunch of these little versions of the big ones, and I do plan on making something with them. I'll probably end up making another throw quilt with a lot more blocks than this, than the larger quilt that I'm making. But anyway, let me get started. I'm not going to waste your time anymore. Hang on. Okay, and I have my fabrics all set to go. Some of them just need to be ironed. And what you're going to need for this process, or this method, the quilt as you piece method, is you're going to need a liquid glue that is washable, and you can use Elmer's school glue. That is actually what is in here. Personally, I don't like the dollar stores cheap, the dollar stores school glue. It just doesn't work as well, but this does wash completely out. And I use a glue stick that is also washable. I do not use the school one, the kind that's purple, because when you heat it back up after it dries, the purple color comes back. So I don't even know. I don't bother with that. I use the white stuff. Okay, and I like to use a air-soluble marking pen whenever I need to use that. And let's see what else I have here. Of course, you're going to need a rotary cutter, ruler, and all that good stuff. And basically the way this works, if you haven't seen my videos before, this is for your benefit. What I do is I actually make double-sided quilts. This is the way I do it. And I will glue these layers together, take them to the sewing machine, and do some quilting lines. And then in order to be able to add the next piece, I'll do this, and I will put glue dots down, and then I'll lay this on there and glue it down and iron set it, and then I'll do that with both pieces on both sides, and I do a zigzag stitch to join the batting to the previous one. And let me get started, and I'll show you exactly how it's done. Okay, let's set this aside. I'm going to take the middle one, and once I've gone through probably the first 2 or 3 pieces, I'm going to go fast forward with music because it's quite repetitive, and you'll actually see me do it. So I'm going to go ahead and press these. I should have pressed these ahead of time, but that's okay. This only takes a moment. And it looks like this might be upside down. There we go. That's correct. Of course, you want the wrong sides facing your batting, of course. All right, so to begin with, you're going to start with the glue stick. And I have another one in backup just in case I run out of this one. And you just put the glue stick all over the fabric. The glue is important for the quilting process. It does a better job with holding your fabric together, and you don't end up with puckers, and you don't need a walking foot. And this piece here, this batting, is from a roll of batting that you normally would use for jelly roll rugs. This particular piece here is 2.5 inches wide, and I do have another roll that's actually 2.25 inches wide, because when you sew these together you lose 1/4 of an inch, and so the 2.25 is really that's what's needed for the second round of batting. All right, so I'm going to put the glue on this one. All right, almost there. Put this on top. And I've made these strips a little extra long, longer than it says in the materials list or the size list, just so that I can have some adjustment for shifting of the batting, because that can happen. And so at this point, what I would do, I'll take it to the computer, take it to the sewing machine and do my quilting on it. And I'm going to use this ruler and eyeball it to mark my center for my quilting. And I go edge to edge on my quilting, so that way when you keep adding on pieces, the edges get buried inside of the seam. Okay. And it doesn't really matter what side you are quilting on, because I'm using the same color thread. I'm using the same exact thread in my bobbin as I am for the top part, so I'm not going to worry about the thread thickness or the tension or anything like that, because it's the same. And when you do when I do all my quilting and top stitching, I use a stitch length of 3.0. When I do the zigzag stitching, the width that you want is 6.0, and the stitch length that you want is 4.0. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the sewing machine, and I'm going to do these quilting stitches. Okay, so it's been quilted, and I didn't bother with stay stitching. I usually put stay stitching on the side of this, but I just didn't want to bother with it. It's not always necessary. But basically, if I were to put stay stitching on here, I would be putting in, I would use a stitch length of 3.0 and just go 1/8 of an inch in. But this time I'm not going to bother with it, because I don't always do it. Okay, so the next thing to do is to grab the next one. Pull this over. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this one, and that gets stitched on to this side, but I'm going to have to iron it a little bit. So the next block that I plan on doing, which I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but I will decide before this day is over, will be free for everyone. There's going to be 30 blocks total, and for each block that is, well, let's see, the very first one was free, then 4 of them are not free, and then the next one will be free. So that's the pattern that I'm going to do. 1 that is free, 4 that are not, and then 1 more that is free, 4 that are not. And that's how I'm going to offer these. So by the time you get all the blocks, well, you'll have enough for a whole quilt. Anyway, I'm rambling. All right, it's kind of pretty. Actually, I think it's really pretty. So I am going to try doing this without the stay stitching. I'm being lazy. Okay, so the next step, and no, I don't want this side, I want this side. You know what? I'm going to go do the stay stitching. It'll make things a little easier. Well, let's try it without it. Okay, basically what you do, I want you to see what I'm doing. For the people who haven't seen me do this before, you put little dots of glue down the edge, about 1 inch apart or so. It's really doesn't really matter, but you know, like more than 3. That's, you know, use your judgment. An inch or so, maybe a little less, closer together. And you want to line these fabrics up as close as possible so that you can't see the fabric underneath it. Make it line up the same. Pat it down a little bit so it sticks, and then I heat set it, and that will make it stay in place. And you want to hold it for a count to from 6 to 10, so that way it will actually set. Okay, and by the time I get it to the sewing machine, it'll be ready to stitch. Okay, and then this one is going to go on this edge. Okay. It'll take me just a moment here. So this strip is actually, like I said before, this strip is a little bit longer than the actual size that I need. So I'm going to be trimming it down to the width once I have all 5 bars or stripes sewn together. I'll trim it down to the width it needs to be. And the way you download this particular PDF file is you go to jpfun.com, and if you're not already registered with a points account, you register, and there'll be later on in this video there'll be a secret code for this video, and that secret code is going to be valid until, well, indefinitely. So even if you're watching this a year from now, this is October 31st, Halloween 2021, even 5 years from now, that code should be good as long as the website's still up. And you can claim 20,000 points and then redeem 20,000 points for this PDF file. And there's also one in the previous 2 block videos that I've made. Okay, so I'm going to go to the machine and do a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And like I said before, the stitch length is at 3.0. Okay, so I have done the stitching and come to the conclusion that the stay stitching is not absolutely necessary. It worked because I glued it. Okay, then what I do is I tug at it. And don't worry about these lines fading. It might take a week for them to fade, but they will fade. They are air soluble. Okay, so this is what I call the tugging process. Tug, yeah, I tug on it. Basically what I'm doing is I'm releasing any glue that might have been caught up outside the seam allowance. Okay, so the next step that I do, I'm going to set that seam too. The next thing that I do is I actually do a zigzag with the settings, the width at 6.0 and the stitch length at 4.0. So I do a zigzag here for the benefit of people who haven't seen one of these videos, and that's how the batting stays in place and it doesn't shift and get bunch up. But I'm also going to put quilting lines on this one, so this will go over like this, and I'll glue it down before I do the quilting part of it. But for now I'm just going to take it to the machine and do the zigzag. Okay, it's done. The zigzag stitching is done. Let's see if you can see it. Kind of hard to see, but it is there. Okay, so a little thing about the way I'm making these is you could actually do this assembly line sewing. Like if you wanted to make a whole bunch of the same block, you could do each set as an assembly line. That's the way I built. I've made 3 quilts in this method, a king size and a queen size, and a throw. Well, some of it was done this way, the other way was quilt as you go. But anyway, I've already tugged it. It is now ready for me to glue this to the batting before I do my quilting. This is actually very important If you don't do the glue, and if you don't do enough glue, you can get waves and you can get puckers. That's why I do this. You can actually use stitch witchery if you know what that is. You can use a fusible web if you want to, but I found that the glue stick works really, really well, and it's inexpensive. You can get washable glue sticks anywhere. All right. Yeah, just don't get the purple kind. The purple disappears, but then you heat it back up and the color comes right back. So not good. All right, and the way I mark for this particular round, I think I'll mark it this side. I use this ruler because I do my first line at a 1/2 inch from the seam, the second one at 1 inch from the first one, and then I'm not going to bother with the stay stitching because it's not absolutely necessary. But I am going to have to trim it before I add the next piece. So I want to make sure that I have enough. So I trim it before I add it so that it's accurate. Okay, so let's make sure that I'm at least 2 1/4. And I am. So before I add the next piece, I'm going to trim that off, and I'm going to do that right now. Okay, got my rotary cutter. I'm setting my line here on the on the seam because that's my 2 1/4, and that's exactly what I need. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that. And then I'm going to go on to the next step. I'm going to need my pressing board for this. So I'm going to put my dots of glue here, and I'm going to grab that next center piece. Whoops. Huh. You know what? I trimmed the wrong side, but that's okay. It's going to be needed anyway. So, this needs to go on this side. So I will trim this side. Might as well. You can trim both sides. It's okay to do that. Okay, I should be at 2 1/4. See, that one's a little bit closer, but still works. Yeah, I forgot that I was doing the center first. Duh. Okay. Okay. This is the side that I want to glue onto. I generally like to do this most of the time. So one thing you can do is, if you tend to get too much glue, have a piece of paper towel nearby, and you can squish out the glue here. All right. Yeah, there's my paper towel. See, I've got a little bit, so I'm just going to go ahead and dab it off, just like that. Simple as that. Okay, I'm going to heat set it. All right, flip it over, do the other side. So you're probably thinking to yourself, why would I want a double-sided quilt? Well, you know, if you're looking at a throw quilt and you make the quilt in the traditional way, the back side is boring. Unless you make a separate quilt and put it on the back side, and you're still making, especially if you don't have a long arm quilting machine. I don't have one, and my nearest one is an hour away. I could send them out, but I like making quilts from start to finish, including the binding and the quilting. So, and because I don't have a machine with a very large throat or arm, well, I don't have a big throat machine, I just thought this would be the easier way for me to do it. And a long, long time ago, when I was a little girl, probably 5 or 6 years old, I remember seeing my very first quilt. I was impressed by the quilt until I looked on the back side. I thought it was the most boring thing. I was really disappointed that the back side wasn't the same as the front. Even at 5 years old, I had sort of an idea of, well, that's what I want to do. I want the back to be the same as the front. And it took me 53 years, 52 years to figure that out, or 50 years to figure it out. But anyway, I made quilts before. I've made traditional quilts before. I'm still working on one that I'm hand quilting, and I started it in 1997. So I've made 3 quilts in the last 2 years this way. One of them took me probably 3 months to make from start to finish. I think it was 3 months, 46 days. It was 46 days. It was a wedding. It was a quilt for a wedding. But anyway, I'm going to go to the machine and do this 1/4 inch seam. Okay, there is something I I forgot to quilt this. So, but that's okay, because I can I can quilt both sides in one sitting. So I'm going to go ahead and do my tuggy thing. Set the seam, tug on it. I'll put the batting in, and then I'll quilt both sides. It's okay. It won't fall apart. You can do that. That's totally okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the sewing machine and do the zigzag stitch, and then get them ready for quilting, and I'll be right back. Okay, so the zigzag has been done, and I'm going to go ahead and do the glue part. All right, and well, if you don't want, well, there was something I thought of. Yeah, let me heat set that. So before I started doing this particular quilt and this set of blocks and this series of blocks, I did not zigzag my batting to my quilt blocks, and it worked fine. But I just wanted to make sure this time that I don't have any issues with the batting, because the batting is different from what I used in those first blocks in the first quilt that I did in this method. The very first quilt used polyester batting that you get from those little jewelry boxes. They were 8 inches by 2 inches, and I pressed them all and put them inside my doing this, and I didn't bother with doing the zigzag stitch, and they're fine. The quilt is heavy though. It's like 7 pounds. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw my quilting lines, and then I'll take it to the sewing machine and do all of the quilting lines. Okay, so a 1/2 inch here. You can do whatever you want for quilting. That's totally up to you. And that that noise you hear, if you hear that little whistle, that's my daughter texting me Yeah, she has a YouTube channel also. She reviews books on her channel. Her name is Joanna Bolduc. I can't remember what her channel name is. Read and Fight Like a Girl, I think. Something like that. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine and do the quilting lines on that. In fact, now that I've mentioned her channel, I'll go find it and I'll provide a link in the description so that you can go check out her video, and then I'll answer that text. I'll be right back. Okay, done with the quilting on this. So the next step is to trim this up on this side and then get started with adding another one. So let's get prepared to double check my measurements. 2 1/4 right there. All right, and from here on out, I am going to fast forward. Okay, so it's done, except for the final trimming, and so I thought I'd, you know, show you how I do that. And I think I am a little bit off, and I am going to do some stay stitching. So I think what I'm going to do first, before I do the trimming, I'm going to check my sides here, and it looks like when I trim it, it'll be absolutely perfect. I'm not going to lose any of my fabric, just the batting, and that's exactly what I want. So let's see, I'm going to line up one of these lines with this line here. That seems to be okay. And I'm going to, well, it's a little off, but it's not bad. I think I'm going to do the stay stitching after I cut it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my rotating cutting mat. Just makes things a little easier. Because I don't want any mistakes. And I'll let the back be what it will be. Alright, so I think maybe push this way. I need to make sure that this edge here to out here is 2 1/4. And it throws me off a little bit because this has got an extra 1/2 inch. So I think I'm going to go by this side. Yeah, I've got 2 inches here. Alright, so I am a little off. But you know what? In the grand scheme of things, I think it'll be fine. See, that is actually 2 1/4 from this line out. So we're good there. Okay. I'm lining up this line in here with this 1/4 inch mark, and that seems to be right on. And this seems to be right on. And this seems to be really, really close to where it needs to be. Again, this is throwing me off a little bit because it's got that extra 1/2 inch thing. It's the way the ruler's made. Alright, so I'm going to turn this around. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Okay, I think I'm ready to cut it. And then I'll do the stay stitching around. Grab my weight and start trimming. I really should have myself a scrap bucket for my trimmings. I have one in my sewing room, but not here at my desk. I'm actually at my desk where I do my website work, and computer sitting right here. Because believe it or not, this camera that I'm using is a webcam. It's not a video camera, it's a webcam. Seems to work really, really well. It's a good webcam. Okay. And this is where I work. And I also, it's an L-shaped desk. And this is part of my desk. Anyway, you didn't need to know that. But you know what? Other people might be wanting to make videos. So hey, I've got a webcam right up above. See? My webcam. Okay. This block is done. I'm not going to bother showing you the finished thing with the stay stitching. I'm just going to do it. But I'm going to show you the other blocks I've made. Alright, I've got 4 others that I've made, and I'm going to show you from start to finish. So this is the one that I just made. Actually, no, I think I'm going to do it in reverse. Okay, let's see if I can remember which order I did them in. Alright, the one that I just did is a log cabin, so bear with me one moment. Okay, so you see the one I did today. That one's called Bordered Stripes. See, these are the stripes and these are the borders. Duh. Yeah, Bordered Stripes. Okay, so the next one I did just previously, this one was the regular log cabin. Here's the blue side, and here is the colorful side. So that was the one I just previously did. And yes, there is a secret code for that one too. And then this one here is the corner log cabin. This one also has a secret code. This one I did just prior to the regular log cabin. And this one, I love having all the blues on one side and the colorful colors on the other side. But this next one is where I made a mistake. And this one is colorful and blue on one side, and then the other side is also colorful and blue. So they're kind of like the same, just in reverse. And then the first one that I did in this series is the 5-strip rail fence block. So recognize the fabrics. I just used different ones for this one. So if you want the PDF files, just go to jpfun.com under membership and sign up for our free points account. Or if you don't want to bother with points, you can sign up for $95 and have access to everything on the site. There's crochet, there's paper bead making, and now there's quilting. And the quilting is just beginning, so there isn't much for quilting yet, but there's also some sewing. And I do have a couple of other videos, sewing videos, that you can watch. Just maybe you'll find them on the website, and they'll link to YouTube so you can watch them. But anyway, I want to thank you for watching, and until next time, I'm thinking the next video is going to be a strip piecing quilt, quilt block, where the strips will go this way, diagonally, and it'll be the same color fabrics, the same ones, and they'll also be the same width of the, these are, jelly roll type strips. So, but it will be on the diagonal for the next one, and the next one is free for everyone, no matter what. Okay, I want to thank you for watching, and until next time, thank you and have a great day. Goodbye.